Well, so here's my story. I was born and raised in the UK, so of course everyone there registers themselves on government forms as Church of England, and every morning there was an assembly at which we sang a hymn, and there was a passage from the Bible was probably read, and all that kind of stuff. So I was, but I never went to church other than for births, funerals, weddings, all that sort of thing. So I guess you could say I was brought up in an atheist household. They sort of paid lip service to religion. So my question about religion in the 21st century is how does religion have to adapt, if it has to adapt for the modern age? So we have a caller. Oh, great.
Hi, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Good morning. My name's Vicky, and I'm calling from Marshall.
Hi, Vicky from Marshall.
Always an interesting conversation, and thank you guys for opening up all these interesting comments. Mm-hmm. Like Paul, I was raised in the UK. Church of England was a very integral part of growing up. We also went to church on Sundays occasionally, and high days and holidays and Christmas and stuff like that. As I grew older, I started to think that it was a shame that the only reason that we did good things was because we were afraid of what was going to happen to us at the end of our days. And my great hope for humanity as we continue to evolve is that we will start doing the right thing just because it's the right thing. Obeying the golden rule, treating other people like we want to be treated ourselves. And it seems that if we could just do that, it would avoid the whole, my religion is better than your religion, and I know what God meant when he said this, or when she said this. So I'll leave further conversation up to your listeners, but I do hope that moving forward we can avoid organized religions and think simply about what's best for us and best for the little blue globe on which we live.
Yes, which was put here for our use, right?
Oh, absolutely, and we're entitled to do exactly what we want with it because it says so. Thank you all.
Thank you, Vicky.
Vicky, thanks very much for your call.
Mm-hmm.
So what Vicky was talking about, this morality. It's been said to me before, in fact, on the streets of Santa Rosa, someone ran into me and was talking about it, that if you didn't have the Ten Commandments, there wouldn't be morality. My thought on that is that probably that somebody wrote down the Ten Commandments because those are the basic kind of rules that you live by if you want to be a member of a community, in a close-knit community. You don't want to be killing people. You don't want to be messing with your neighbor's wife. You don't want to steal their cow or their ass or whatever it is it says. They're just basic rules for communal living, right?
And different religions come pretty much to the same thoughts. I mean, it's about caring for your neighbor, caring for members of your community from your clan, and caring for the planet. Now, some religions seem to have let that slip a little bit, I think. Mm-hmm. And then there's this idea of a fair share, and I bring those three things out of permaculture ethics, and I wonder if couldn't every religion actually agree that there's a foundation that all religions are based on that is something like that would indeed. But then again, that gets us all to trying to have one religion for all.
Right.
And I'm not sure that monotheism or a monoculture is the answer. The diversity of religions actually can serve us as a species. Yeah,
diversity of religion, yeah. If there were... So the religions are vying for customers also, right? We were talking about that earlier, about how they're indulging in salesmanship to try and attract more members. I think that's...
Some religions.
ISIS is trying to do that, trying to attract young men by with the glory of violence in God's name.
Well, the Christians coming to the Americas and throughout the globe sure did the same thing. I mean, that was all violence enforced, you will believe in our Bible.
Right. And the Pope, God bless him, is also indulging in salesmanship. I think that's an example of how churches are adapting to modern life, is that he is saying things. He is putting into place rules that are more acceptable to the West, to Europe and America.
Well, American Catholics have been pushing the Vatican for my observation. I'm not within the Catholic Church, but my observation has been that past popes have been really reluctant to make much change. The original teachings as they've been interpreted, it's sort of like our Constitution, and any amendments now are going to go real slow. And so I'm excited with this pope for his willingness to go beyond what has been the dogma.
Before. Right.
Yeah, and so he's not perfect by any means. But one of the things that I don't know that he can follow up on, he had once expressed the idea that the Vatican was filled with too many important people, and that those cardinals and bishops and priests that are working there ought to maybe have a tenure at the Vatican of only 2 years and then go back to the flock that they came from as a priest and work in the field. And that would be a decentralization, more of a local approach that I would very much favor. So I hope, but I don't know if he can actually, one pope can change the establishment in one reign. Maybe it takes a succession of bold popes.
So it's term limits and downsizing, maybe, right? Welcome to the 21st century. And they just occurred to me, they'd still never apologized to Galileo, of course. But
and how are they doing for women, Raven?
Well, I just listened to an interview with the Pope a couple of days ago as he was leaving the U.S., and somebody asked him if he had any intention of letting women have equal rights within the church, and he said absolutely no. He has no intention of letting women become spiritual leaders within the Catholic Church because woman was created from a rib of man.
Boy, yeah.
Rib.
and the latest news of him having a special audience with Kim Davis, that Kentucky clerk who refused to issue gay marriage licenses in her county. That made some of our euphoria of us sort of progressive types or people that see the beauty in him appreciating that climate change is a product of capitalism. I mean, it's one thing when Naomi Klein says that, it's important, and some people listen. But when the Pope says that, many more people listen. Like, how many Christians are there really?
Oh, I haven't. Oh, yes, I did some research on that. The top 10 organized religions. I printed some stuff off the internet. Apparently, Christianity has 2.1 billion adherents.
And that's number one?
And that's number one. There's more than 4.5 billion people in the world are apparently part of an organized religion. And so Christianity is tops with 2.1 billion, followed by Islam, which has 1.3 billion. And then the next one after that is Hinduism with 1 billion. Followed by Buddhism with a mere 376 million. The numbers drop off after that. Sikhism, 23 million. Judaism, only 14 million. So by far the largest is Christianity and Islam.
Paul, you were talking about the marketing that the churches are doing. Now, some are doing it more than others, obviously, and the Catholic Church clearly is doing it for a reason because they had been losing. And the American church has been pushing for more liberalization.
Right.
I think the women in the Catholic Church in the United States will keep pushing to one day get women ordained within
women priests. Yeah, absolutely. And and that's Christianity, evangelism, all the different sects of Christianity. What happens if they all stopped fighting with one another? What if they were what if there were a merging of the different businesses so they could capture more more adherents. I don't know how deep these schisms run. I mean, I know that...
Is that like Democrats and Republicans like working together?
Right. Get the two-church system. Because I think evangelists don't recognize Catholicism as actual Christianity or something. Isn't that right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Donald Trump knows how to work the media. Some religions know how to work their system to get people excited.
Right. And then there's Islam, of course, which is we hear is another message of peace. It's based on a book that extols peaceful living and living together, and yet it's spawning, what is more publicized these days as a violent fundamentalism. Although Christianity had its very fair share of that for centuries.
I have an observation. I don't know if you share this idea that it's more the Americans who are more evangelical and more traditionalist based that seem to focus on the Islam jihadists and the idea that their religion teaches them terror, whereas many of us who are atheists or a part of that, I don't think come to that conclusion at all, in that each religion can have its hard right wing that is fundamentalist and can have a majority of the people truly doing it for noble human caring.
Right. And we hear there was that great discussion that you put up on Facebook with Lawrence Krauss, who was the only atheist on the panel, but there was a rabbi and a Catholic nun who's doing good works, and the opinion is amongst them is that that religion fosters this caring for others, that especially the Catholic woman was saying she equated her religion, her religious belief, with caring for others, and of course Lawrence Krauss says, well, can't you have that without actually believing in God? I mean, is there no moralistic way of behaving without?
But if you look at our secular culture here, where we pursue wealth and status and power, political power. And so our secular world definitely does go to excesses to create inequality that I think the religious groups offer some balance to. I think if you completely dismiss them, as he did, and say that we could have that morality, yes, we could. There's no reason, I don't think, to believe in a monotheist and the polytheist religions tended to not be so absolute and have more room for diverse opinions and stuff, and still have their fundamental faiths. And what we call religions also include methodologies. Buddhism, as I understand it, is less about worshiping a god, but practicing spiritual techniques and practices that you learn that help you get in touch with your spiritual self.
Yeah, so the various religions keeping up with the age of science, the new age of science. The knowledge that we now have of the cosmos and creation and the Big Bang and everything that's being studied and researched, and what we're finding out now, how does that fit with religion of any kind?
Well, I think in some ways it is the new one true religion, science. It has, it's a belief system, it's dogmatic, it's unquestioned and fiercely defended, it has its own leaders and authority figures, which I might add are mostly, if not entirely, male. And, it's replacing religion as the source of answers to the big questions: how the universe was created, the Big Bang, how people were created, that's evolution, and from apes, social apes, what determines morality, that's the social ape theory again, and how do we relate to the rest of the universe? Well, we're just nothing. We're just tiny specks in this huge cosmos. And you might not agree with any of these answers, but they have a huge influence on our culture across the board. If you don't accept these facts of science on faith, then you're kind of seen as a bit crazy, a bit nuts. And it's taught in all our schools, by the way. A lot of Christians homeschool for that reason. And, I think science could be the new God.
Well, You know, the same way that religions, organized religions, take, let's say, the life of Jesus, who the historical Jesus was clearly a man that had a lot to offer in terms of reevaluating how they were living, etc. So he taught peace and taking care of the least, etc. But now that religion has taken on other precepts that have nothing to do with that origin and are dogmatic about those in many cases. And I'd say science is the same thing. At a root level, science is just a methodology for inquiry. You know, you find out how things are and how they work. Science doesn't actually say we need a unifying theory. They have taken it back to a Big Bang theory and you know, the Newtonian physics, and then the relativity, and then the string theory, etc. So it keeps advancing, but you're right, the way it is pushed, sometimes things that are truly not scientific are pushed under the agenda of sort of the corporate science of the institutions of our universities and our schools. And so it comes across as science with an agenda and science with a but unfortunately, we shouldn't, I don't think, disparage the methodologies of science, because that's about truth-seeking.
Right.
Satisfying curiosity. But it doesn't explain why. I mean, humans want to know, why am I here on the earth?
Why am I here?
And when the religion gives them that answer, science doesn't give them the answer. As I think you were saying, Raven, you're just a speck in a university of tetratrillions, whatever. You can't even come up with numbers as big as we know about. Yet we're still seeking the why. Science can't give us the why, just maybe the how.
Sorry to interrupt again. But some scientists, you know, both my parents are physicists. They both have PhDs, actually, in astrophysics. That's how they met. And they both went in very different directions with those careers. And my dad was a complete atheist. He believed in nature. He didn't think when you were dead, you were dead. There's no such thing as God. Whereas my mother grew up in the Church of England, and she isn't really Christian, but she's very, very spiritual. And she's introduced me to a lot of the new cosmology and this new physics that actually celebrates or accepts or honors the mystery, in the great mystery in life, that we cannot know the unknowable, that there is an intelligent design, that there is a purpose back there. And you know Albert Einstein himself, who was also a physicist, he didn't believe in God per se, but I'll read this quote. He said, "The most beautiful and most profound experience is the sensation of the mystical. It is the sower of all true science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. To know what is impenetrable to us really exists, manifesting itself as the highest wisdom and the most radiant beauty, which our dull faculties can comprehend only in their primitive forms. This knowledge, this feeling is at the center of true religiousness."
Wow, yeah.
Albert.
I know. He was quite the dude.
Yeah, I think our science is within another hierarchical system. Our patriarchal culture is using the science as its secular foundation. And I think in some ways it's misusing it because it's still national sovereignty. It's still global control of things. It's monoculture. It is not that kind of more indigenous spirituality that viewed sacredness as all of nature, the land, the water, the animals, the hunting we do. That kind of spirituality, the monotheists have pushed out of their areas. They pushed them out in Europe. The pagans lost to the Romans, right? And the Romans adopted Christianity. Then the Europeans spreading to Africa, North and South America, they brought their mostly Christianity with them.
Right. And there's an example of how Christianity back then, the church was adapting other beliefs as they spread, like through UK, through Britain. They adopted the beliefs of the pagans that were there, and took their sites over, knocked over the standing stone, put a church on top of it, and adopted. They transformed whatever the people. They had deities,
they made an accommodation.
And they turned it into saints. They'd have Saint Kevin is one of my favorites.
Saint Sonora of Zeno in the UK is another.
Zeno.
And they took over the holidays too, right?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
Christmas had to be with the pagan holidays.
Right. Yeah, and that's all. That's marketing, and it's also adapting to those places. The same thing. The missionaries going out to South America and Africa adapted their beliefs after they'd been brought into the mission and clothed and everything. They adapted the Christian theology that they were teaching to local conditions, and maybe that's what needs to happen now with the church. I think that is what's happening. I think that's why the Pope is doing what he's doing.
I'm going to question you saying adapted because estimates are between 6 and 9 million women were burned at the stake or drowned or killed. Mostly women, some children, some male. In fact, some homosexual male. That's where the term faggots comes from, by the men that were burned at the stake.
Wow.
And I would question whether the church adapted to those pagan sites or the pagan people rather than, subdued, subordinated, oppressed, killed.
Well, let's say they adopted some of the
appropriated.
Appropriated. That's a good word.
But they kept the main fear thing of if you don't do as we say, you're going to hell.
Well,
and describing hell as a place you're going to live eternally.
Yeah, right. And if you didn't behave, you would burn in hell for eternity. Yes, that's an interesting way to get people to behave, instead of promoting just communal living and good behavior for itself.
Yeah. Instead of really learning about what that culture uses as its means to keep themselves organized and growing and succeeding in life. My daughter took a study in Ghana, and she said that when you ask people there, "Are you Christian?" they say yes, but there are also other things. So they're able to take the Christianity that was brought to them and not make it the exclusive religion. They still hold, in many cases, other views that are more from their cultural heritage.
Well, it's interesting. So as obviously as the figures that Raven has, over half the population of the world call themselves adherents to one faith or another. And obviously there's a need for something like that. It's within us, right, I guess?
Well, little children, what's their favorite word? Why? Go to your room. Why?
Why?
Eat this. Why?
Well, because religion provides a sense of meaning, doesn't it, to our lives? That's right.
Yeah.
And it asks those big questions. Why are we here? What does it all mean? How do I fit in? How should I live? And, religion also encourages us to be the best that we can be. I think that's a good thing, but I don't personally think we need organized religion to ask these questions, because I ask these questions of myself every day, and I'm definitely not religious.
Yeah, I'm not religious either, but I view that I'm missing something in this complex world that we live in. There are so many drivers, and I'm seeing that it adds up to destruction of the planet. The ecocide that we're experiencing from our system tells me we're missing something. So when the Pope comes in and says we need to take care of the earth, I haven't heard that kind of clarity from our secular leaders. They'll go around the edges, like we got to invest more in renewable energy, or let's not do Arctic drilling, but let's do fracking, or whatever. Let's do the pipeline, but not here. They're too nuanced, but we're missing that overall foundation that someone with his authority, when he says it, all of a sudden people say yes.
Right.
We do care about the planet and the species and the least of us.
It's a good follow. Yes, it's a great message because he has such a huge following. The Catholic Church has such a huge following, and if they do accept that is the new Christianity, if you like, that we have to take care of the earth. It wasn't just put there for us to rape and pillage and everything's okay. It's it's certainly a step in the right direction for that organization.
Yeah. Well, we who are in the culture of modern living, and money plays such a big role, and it's a role to wealth and power and comfort, and we seek that comfort and power and etc. there has to be an offsetting value. And religion is the only place that I can see that it really came from. Now, I can buy into a religion that is called permaculture because I recognize monoculture is killing us, and we need this kind of polyculture and balance with nature. And their ethics are really simple. Earth care, people care, fair share. And those simple values I could subscribe to. I could probably subscribe to more indigenous cultures who saw the sacredness of everything in their lives that had to be protected. That I don't think that sacredness exists in our secular society. We see a forest and we think about how much that timber is worth. We see a landscape and we say, how can we farm it? We really have put everything in a monetized view, and the future value for future generations, who's speaking to that? So
that's true.
I was so excited to hear the Pope, but I'm so disappointed on some of those scores that we know about where he is not inclined to want to open it up to women as equals.
Right.
Or gay marriages.
Yeah. Well, see, on the gay subject, he early on said, who am I to judge? So that gave a new sense of thou shalt not. So a lot of people were giving him a great credit for not focusing on these bad things that so much of the church is about wagging their finger at people, but saying, I want to be inclusive. I want to bring everybody in. And that's why I think some people now are saying Kim Davis, he got duped into having that cult, because what it does is it gives some legitimacy to people who still want to fight against the gay marriage thing.
Yeah. So there's a little statistic here. The forgiveness for a year for women, Catholic women who have abortions, was something that the Pope started. Apparently, Catholic women in the U.S. seek abortions at about the average rate of the population, approximately 1 in 3. So there's some pressure that was being put on by parishioners, I guess, by American Catholics that this needed to be done. And the
fact that he visited the United States, that he knows is pressing from the left on a lot of issues, I think showed courage on his part. And then a lot of people recognize how carefully he parsed his words. So when he spoke to the Congress, he did not specifically say abortion, and he specifically didn't say gay marriage. He talked about inclusivity and taking care of everyone, and he did not say the word climate change, but he talked about taking care of the planet. So he avoided the hot button issues that divide us. So he came, I think, well prepared for the most part, to talk to us in a new way, and actually allows American Catholics to continue to advance their religious views.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's playing to the crowd. Yes. I mean, it's. He didn't want to get lynched by the.
Yeah, but he didn't have to come in the first place, right?
True. Yeah. True. And he did take a hand in U.S.-Cuba relations, apparently, and getting that going. So
So having criticized capitalism before he came, I mean, that's a huge step. I mean, how bold is that for a pope to actually put the fault of what's happening with climate change and the degradation of our ecosystems on the backs of the capitalist system? That's a huge step. It's easy for Naomi Klein to do and write a book and be popular, but compared to the power of the Pope, this is huge.
Right, but capitalism and patriarchy are closely tied, guys.
Yes, absolutely. And patriarchy has always been the hallmark of Christianity, of the Catholic Church, for sure. And so has capitalism come to that. They were the power in Europe for how many centuries?
Hello, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please?
I'm on the air. Dan Baker. I'm a friend of Paul Reffell.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, Paul. How are you?
All right.
I couldn't get the thing to stream on the internet, but I heard a little bit of your discussion about the Catholic Church, etc., and I have a couple of views if you'd like to hear them.
Okay, keep it clean.
Oh, in that case, I'm leaving.
No. We want your views, please.
Well, anyway, one of the things that drives me straight up the wall, especially after I read Earl Doherty's work about the actual existence of Christ as a historical figure. Did he live or did he not live? And it doesn't take very long to get through that debate where you realize that not only did Christ not exist, he could not have existed, especially the way the New Testament is pinned together. There's more holes in that thing than there are in the Warren Commission. And every time I hear Christ referred to as a historical figure, I just go nuts because he was not a historical figure. And in fact, a very interesting guy who just died a while back, a guy named Luigi Cassioli, who was a priest in Italy, sued the Catholic Church for running a fraudulent operation because they could not prove that Christ ever lived or ever existed. And oddly enough, it ended up in the Hague. It was tried in the Hague, and he won.
Huh. Wow. Are they going to try Santa Claus next?
Oh, well, listen, I could have given him a much better myth than that. And one of the things, if you get bored sometime, check out a guy named Earl Doherty. He's a Canadian who ran down this whole story. And one of the many mistakes that the people who put the New Testament together made was place names. And I've written a nonfiction book, and I dealt with place names, and I know that they sometimes change in spelling and whatnot, but they don't jump around the map. So anyway, he discovered, and other writers discovered, that there were so many glaring place name mistakes in the First Testament that they kind of wondered where they all came from. And then they ran across this document, I can't remember the name of it now, but I can get it if you want. It was a travelogue from the first century in Palestine, written by people who hadn't been there. They had just talked to people who had been there. And they made, guess what, 28 place name mistakes. No, it was the Octogenarian is the name of the document. In other words, the New Testament was written at the direction of the church. It was written by editors, and they copied all of these mistakes directly into the New Testament, which is one of the reasons that all four of the Gospels in the New Testament are anonymous. You know, Mark who? John who? Luke who? When? Where? You know, I mean, Buddha wrote stuff his entire life, signed and dated everything. He had a date of birth. He had a date of death. Muhammad was a historical figure. He wrote and signed and dated things his entire life. And then you get to this Christ thing. All of a sudden, he pops in and out of history a couple of times. He's supposed to be a Jewish religious activist, has no family name. And all Jewish religious figures, no matter who they were, they published in the Torah. And that was part of the deal. So that's why nothing is ever attributable to Christ, because he didn't write anything.
Well, it gives him a Teflon quality, doesn't it?
Well, you know, and that's what drives me nuts. The Christians have this mantle of moral authority that they can tell the world what is right is wrong because they're Christians. And I said, you know, have you ever looked into that story? So there you go. My hero is Luigi Cassioli. Is my hero. I was going to go see him in Italy. I was dying to shoot an interview with him, but he died.
Well, thank you, Dan. My goodness, that gives us some food for thought.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Dan a question.
Go ahead.
Over how many centuries was the New Testament actually written?
Well, it's funny you should ask. I have a book titled The Fabrication of the Christ Myth here by a lawyer wrote this, and he put that whole story together, how they fabricated it, where they got all that stuff, where they I'm trying to find it. I can't remember his last name.
Well, we know later on, King James was a version now that's popular now. So there's been these translations over time that have also skewed the message, has it not?
Well, they had a lot of tracks to cover. They're kind of like the guys that wrote the Warren Commission. They were flying a huge load, and they did their best to plug giant holes, but they didn't get very far. The title of this book is The Fabrication of the Christ Myth by Harold Leidner, Leidner, and that's pretty much the whole story of how they whacked it together. In fact, the Pope, one of the early popes, publicly mentioned that he said something to the effect of, we had no idea this Christ fable would take off the way it did. opened the kimono by accident a couple of times.
Yeah. So, I think 400 years after the death of Christ, I guess, was
like
when
somewhere in the 300
when the first
range.
texts
And here's
appeared.
another thing. That fascinated me. When the early Christians went to the Jews and they said, "We believe our Christ myth fits the Judaic Messiah, and he should be considered the Judaic Messiah." Well, the Jews turned him down, and I happen to have a neighbor in Arizona who was a rabbi, and I asked him that question when I got back from L.A. after Mel, what's his name, made the Passion of Christ and got kicked out of L.A. But
Gibson.
I asked him why. Why did the Jews turn down the Christians to punch this ticket of the Judaic Messiah? And he said, well, there were two reasons. One, the Jews did not like the fact that this person was a human being, was supposed to be part of God. They didn't like that. And then he told me something which just floored me. He said, also, the Jews had two very prominent historians in Jerusalem in the first part of the first century. And they recorded everything but the Little League scores. I mean, I'm serious. And at a time, and here's another mistake the Christians made when they pinned this thing together. They used Pontius Pilate as the Roman governor of Jerusalem, which he was. But the problem with that is that he was a real historical figure. And not only was he a real historical figure, but he was famous for, guess what? Getting fired. He was one of the very few Roman governors who was recalled by Rome because he kept stirring up these fights with the Jews. So they were trying to get him to lay down. So he was assigned a biographer to record every single thing he did while he was in Jerusalem. And not only that, but there were 42 historians, journalists, etc., in Jerusalem who recorded absolutely everything. And if he had tried a Jewish activist in public and sentenced him to die, it would have been front page news. It would have been like Arnold Schwarzenegger trying Scott Peterson.
Yeah. So there's no record of the Messiah, so to speak.
The Christians forged an entry into Josephus, one of his accounts, which is a clumsy forgery and is widely considered as a forgery. But of the 42 extant historians, etc., in Jerusalem, not a single word was ever recorded about any Jesus figure.
Well, thank you, Dan. We have to
I don't want to
do a station break, but thank you very much. That's food for thought, and other people call in, please, with other views.
I'll get off, and thank you all very kindly.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Well,
Yes.
Dan certainly took a shot at organized religion. I hope there's some folks of faith who will call in. Oh, we got a caller right now. 1 second here. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name?
Hi, it's Lyons.
Oh, hi, Lyons. Are you a person of faith?
I'm a person of spiritual faith.
Oh, good.
God in heaven, the long white beard, the thing I learned about when I was growing up, it just never made any sense to me. Heaven and hell never made any sense to me. And at 15, I stopped going to church, and to my mother's credit, she didn't pressure me. And I'm forgetting, I was probably early in college, maybe in high school, I learned about, what do you call it when you get born again? Not born again Christians or this is or that's, but next lifetime. Reincarnation.
Oh, reincarnation. Okay.
Thank you. And I thought, wow, that really does make sense. Just to me, it made a lot of sense. And my one-liner about religion is that I think, unfortunately, human organized religion gives God a bad name.
Ooh.
And I find it so ironic that we are so attached to, we'll just say to a religion and to a
particular story
or whatever. Not even a particular story, but that, if the church you're part of or some other church does something that's really reprehensible, and unfortunately some of that's going on, so often people will say, well, I don't believe in God anymore. It's like, I'm sorry, God has nothing to do with it. These are human-created religions. It's human error, human racism, sexism, whatever. Nothing to do with God, whoever or whatever God is. So
that's a great point.
Yeah.
I like what you're saying because it's our human error system is not the problem; it's the human interface.
There are many evangelical ministers who would be great examples of human error.
Well, they do make for salacious news stories, don't they?
Oh, indeed.
We haven't had too many of those recently.
I remember Bill Moyers, the journalist, many, many years ago. He did a series of programs that were related to religion, and I remember him talking about his own faith. I think he was raised a Southern Baptist, and I may not be getting this accurately, but I remember him saying something to the effect that what he appreciated about that form was that there wasn't a priest or something like that as an intermediary. People were encouraged to read the Bible and understand it themselves, not to have it told to them or mediated for them by someone who was supposedly the authority or the person in place.
Really? So the Baptist ministers are not...
Well, that's why I say I'm not sure I'm remembering this correctly, so don't take me at my word. But I remember Bill Moyers talking about the church he was raised in. You were encouraged to read and understand the Bible yourself, not mediated.
So it was more about Bible study than.
Well, just that you an individual, were responsible for your relationship to God. You weren't being as directed. I should stop talking because, as I say, I don't know, what faith that was with or not. But I don't know. We just, we identify everything in such a human form because, we're in bodies, and when it looks like something we recognize, we give it more power, I think.
Right. Well, one of the monotheistic religions early on separated humans from other species. For me, that was a mistake.
Big boo-boo,
yeah.
in my opinion, too.
Because other religions don't do that. I mean, the indigenous cultures are much more, we are a part of this network of life.
Yes.
There's a very interesting guy, I'm not quite sure, he's some sort of philosopher, I'm not quite sure what to call it, David Abram, Abram, and he's written The Spell of the Sensuous, and a book that came out a few years ago that I'm reading now called Becoming Animal, which is quite intriguing. That touches on the point about not making a distinction between the human animal and the other species.
That we are not the supreme beings we think we are.
Well, I don't think we are, but...
Well, I've met David Abram, and I've read his books, and he's brilliant. He's definitely pagan, an animist.
Yes.
And I am too, actually. And you know what? I mean, what started when we were in hunter-gatherer lifestyles, we were egalitarian. It was definitely animism, primitivism, but with the rise of agriculture and civilization came the rise of organized religion because, it has a lot of ties to politics, actually, and money and hierarchy and organized power. And I just want to make this point, if I haven't made it already in this show, that the God of organized religions is always a man. It's always a male deity. And it's been used as a tool to keep women in their place since the beginning of recorded history. Animism doesn't do that, but religions do. And the Bible itself, which we were reading just before we came in here, is a handbook for the subjugation of women. It really is, if you look at it. And, anyway, just that point, that all the holy books and scriptures were written by men, for men. We don't have a holy book that's been by and for women. And organized religion says that we women have no rights and control over our bodies. We must love and obey first our fathers and then our husbands. We're weak and inherently evil and need guidance and control, and we're either Madonnas or whores.
Yes. And all of that thinking is just so weird. None of it makes sense to me.
It's so
Well, that's because you're a woman.
Why?
But it has to change.
Well, kudos to the Episcopalians.
It makes sense to all the men. Just kidding.
Very funny.
I'll have to take your word for that. But kudos to the Episcopalians for making women priests.
Women priests, yeah.
Hooray.
And allowing marriage
Church
and all that.
hasn't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
But liberation theology,
Sure.
amen.
Yeah.
And Pope Francis, is that his name, the new one?
Yes.
He's on some pretty good tracks there.
Well, liberation theology, certainly, and the impetus, the ability for guys who are priests and go to war-torn areas and foment kind of uprisings against dictatorships and all that. It was a wonderful thing certainly in Central America, South America, and they had that built-in. They had the built-in audience that they could talk to, which was very useful in some cases. And I have in front of me Richard Kirschman's PG-13 Bible, in which he highlights all the repulsive passages in the Old Testament.
Thanks, Lion.
Thanks, Lions. Let's let another caller come in. Okay, great.
Thank you. Yeah, it is interesting. We were reading this out front. Thank you, Richard, for bringing this by. And it's got all these. A lot of passages are highlighted about how unclean women are and all the things they have to do. If they give birth to a girl child, then she's unclean for a longer period of time than if she gave birth to a boy child. Right? I mean, it's amazing stuff.
I threw in a poor joke, Raven, and I apologize because I totally agree that women have not been treated equally in our species, and religion is a main fault of that. I did, though, want to try to identify some areas where religions are doing good. I mean, I'm not in line with them, but I'm in awe of how many religious organizations come to the aid of the poor, the right. people who need it the most. And yes, often those are nurses and women teachers and who are not given fair status, but they're doing the hard work of caring for the poor. And I don't know that if we didn't have organized religion that we would do that as well. I think it drives us as a society, because I don't know what's in our culture to care for everyone that way while we're pursuing wealth and money and property ownership.
Well, how much of that's an interesting question. So how much of the capitalist mindset was fostered by organized religion? I don't know, because
the hierarchy was adopted.
You could certainly see the power of the hierarchy, the power of the church in Europe, for example, running kingdoms, really. I mean,
and that's a parallel to war making. You can't run a war where everyone is equal. You have to have hierarchy, to have discipline, to have strategies and tactics.
You have to have God on your side, too.
Yeah, no kidding. So, hi, caller. You're on the air. What's your name?
This is Richard from Points Raised.
Hi, Richard.
I just wanted to point out that the most just societies on the planet today, perhaps the Northern European countries, Sweden and Norway, etc., are the least religious. The ones where women have the most equality, where they have the least violence, and they are the least warlock and the most economically just societies. And I don't think it's a coincidence.
Excellent point. Thank you. Yes, certainly Denmark stands out as an amazing place, from their prison systems all the way down through their whole society, really, as a paragon of what you can do as a developed country.
I thought Protestantism was still big in the Scandinavian countries. Richard?
Oh, yeah, you're on speaker.
I don't believe that's true. It may be bigger than another religion, but they're all on the wane, and it's slowly disappearing.
So that's an example of secularism done well?
People just are walking away from it. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't improve their lives, and it seems sort of superstitious, and it's irrelevant.
What are they walking towards?
Social justice.
Yeah, through the kind of national identities that we have, the national sovereignty model.
Well, using their sense of reason. And when they have a question, instead of going to looking in Leviticus or Genesis for an answer about how the world is and why it is, they ask a scientist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, and in fact, they're fostering the things that we are told were the teachings of Christ, but without the Christ. That's how that's working.
I'm not sure I would have put it that way, but.
Well, thank you, Richard. That's a great point. And thank you for the PG-13 Bible, by the way, available in bookstores.
It's also available online. I think you can get it now as a download for 99 cents.
Wow. Excellent.
Well, Richard, thanks for your contribution today.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah, well,
a good point, right? I mean, if countries can become supportive and creatively using creative ideas to make life better for their people, and if religion is dying there and it's not the mainstay of the culture, then what does that mean? And so there's the question again: how does religion adapt to situations like that, where it may no longer be needed for those things?
Well, what becomes the dominant culture, though, I think has to be tolerant of people that don't share that faith, that don't share that particular vision. So I'm an advocate of keeping diversity. I hope we have lots of religions, and what we say in this country we profess is freedom of religion. The fact that so many Americans say that we shouldn't have a Muslim president, or that we should fear Muslims because of their inherent difficulties with their religion, those are the kind of things I think we got to be careful of, so that we don't have a dominant paradigm that becomes all-inclusive, so that it becomes its own monoculture of thinking, that we continue to allow and encourage that diversity of thought that we experience now. We are fortunate in that the time we're born, we can choose our religion. Most people in the world and in our history, they were just born into a religion, just like they were born into a town, into a community, and there was no choice involved.
Right. And in fact, it would be dangerous if you were not part of that religion in some places, of course, I
mean, I think it's important that we have a diversity of religion too, Bernie, but I think all religion needs to be grounded in an ecological worldview, and all religion needs to have equal rights for women, men, and nature, or we're never going to get to peace on this planet or have any kind of a sustainable way of life.
Well,
all religion should point towards conscious living, right? And
but when
mindfulness.
You phrase it that way, if all religion should, that's trying to impose some structure on it. So I would rather not make that statement. I agree with you that those are my values. I mean, I put the future of our species ahead of current economic wealth. And I'd like to say that all religions should do that, but I'd rather not try to tell religions, because that's our Constitution.
No shoulds, right.
We don't, as a government or as a people, get to impose a majority view on everyone. And so that freedom of religion is a way that people can still say, I demand my rights to think differently.
Yeah.
Even if it means the rape and pillage of the earth and women.
Well, God said it was all right.
Time's up, guys.
Yeah.
Time's up.